The text came at 11:43 on a Tuesday night, which I know because I was still sitting in the parking garage of Chicago O'Hare, too tired to actually drive, staring at the concrete pillar in front of me like it owed me an apology. It said, "Don't freak out when you get home." I stared at that for a long time. Then I typed back, already freaking out. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Just come inside first. Then I'll explain. My name is Owen Fletcher. I'm 31 years old, and I design acoustical systems for performance venues, which sounds like a job that should involve more concert tickets than it does. Mostly it means I spend weeks in cities that aren't mine, standing in empty rooms with a sound meter and a thermos of gas station coffee, arguing with contractors who think good enough is a professional standard. I'd been in Cincinnati for 4 days. 4 days of substandard hotel pillows, a client who changed the spec sheet twice, and a regional manager named Don who used the phrase circle back like it was a medical procedure. I drove home on autopilot. Our building is a converted textile warehouse in Wicker Park, the kind that has exposed brick and terrible water pressure and costs more than it should because someone put the word loft in the listing. I'd been living there for 8 months with Petra Voss, who I'd met through a mutual friend, who had moved out 3 weeks into our lease because of a job offer in Portland, and a startling lack of guilt about it. Petra was an occupational therapist, 28 years old, and the only person I knew who kept her spice rack in alphabetical order and still somehow burned pasta. She'd posted on a neighborhood board looking for a new roommate. I'd responded within the hour, and she'd handed me a questionnaire that included the phrase, "Please rate your emotional bandwidth on a scale of 1 to 10. I wrote down 7, which was generous. She accepted anyway. 8 months. Long enough to know her yogurt brand, her work schedule, her habit of talking back to documentary narrators when she thought they were wrong. Long enough to accidentally memorize the sound of her laugh from 3 rooms away. Long enough to have a very detailed internal policy about not doing anything stupid. I parked in the garage, took the elevator, stood outside our door for exactly 4 seconds longer than necessary. When I pushed it open, the lights in the living room were all on, which was unusual for midnight. Petra was sitting on the couch in her work clothes, shoes still on, which was also unusual because Petra treated shoes on indoors like a personal moral failing. Her hair had escaped its elastic entirely. She was holding a mug with both hands like it was a life preserver. She looked up at me. "So," she said. "So." I set my bag down slowly. "Where?" "Asleep in my room. She drove in from Indianapolis today." She had. Petra stopped, pressed her lips together. She had a situation. I waited. With Petra, situations had ranges. There was the situation where her health insurance denied a claim for 3 months. There was the situation where her downstairs neighbor flooded her storage unit. Both had been handled with the same contained expression she was wearing now, which told me this one was worse. "She left Kyle," Petra said. Kyle was Petra's brother-in-law. I had heard about Kyle exactly twice, both times secondhand through Petra, and both times the stories ended with phrases like, "So then he said that, and I can't even tell you," and a very specific silence that said everything the words didn't. "Okay," I said. "Good." Petra exhaled. "She has the kids with her. They're in my room too. I gave them my bed." "There," she rubbed her face. "There's 3 of them, Owen." I did a quiet recalculation of our apartment. Ages? 7, 5, and almost 2. Right. She doesn't want to go to a hotel because the youngest has an ear infection and she's been driving since noon and she's completely. Petra shook her head. She just needs a few days to figure out the next step. I looked at our apartment. 1 bedroom, 1 loft sleeping area up the open stairs. The couch was technically a sleeper, but it had a bar in the middle that had made a house guest wince once and never return. She needs a few days, I repeated. Which means I need your. Petra stopped. God, this is a lot to walk into. You just got home, Petra. You've been traveling for 4 days, and I'm about to ask you, Petra. She looked at me. Where are you sleeping? She swallowed. That's the thing. There is a very specific kind of silence that happens when the thing a person has to say is a thing they have already rehearsed 3 times and still can't figure out how to start. The loft, she said carefully, only fits 1 bed, yes, and Danny's in my room with the kids, yes, and the couch bar is a liability. It is. She looked at me very directly. I was thinking we could both sleep in the loft. There are sentences a person expects to hear from their roommate at midnight. The Wi-Fi's down. We're out of dish soap. Don't eat the leftover pad thai, I'm saving it. That was not one of them. We're both adults, she added quickly, as though she'd anticipated my response and was trying to stay ahead of it. It's a queen bed. We can put pillows down the middle. It's 2 days, maybe 3, pillow fortification, I said. Architectural division of space. Don't make it weird. I'm not making it anything. I've been awake for 19 hours. She stood. The mug went to the kitchen counter. When she came back, she had the particular expression of someone who has resolved to act normal and is fighting every instinct to do so. I already moved your pillow up there, she said. From the storage closet. You moved my pillow. The spare pillow. From the bin. You planned this. I panicked and then planned it. There's a difference. Barely. Her mouth twitched. Just barely. Do you want to eat something? There's leftover soup. I want to change and pass out. That's fair. I grabbed my bag and went to the bathroom, where I brushed my teeth and stared at myself for a moment in the mirror. My hair was flat on one side. I had a wrinkle pattern on my jaw from the airplane headrest. I looked like a man who had made excellent professional decisions and a poor quantity of personal ones. When I came out in a t-shirt and sweatpants, Petra was already upstairs in the loft. The lamp was on, low, angled toward the wall. She'd set a line of pillows down the center of the bed like a small and unconvincing border wall. She was on the far side with a book open in her hands and the studied expression of someone pretending to read. I climbed the stairs, stood at the edge of the bed. The loft had the kind of ceiling that sloped just enough to make standing fully upright conditional on your exact location. This is extremely normal, Petra said, eyes on the page. Completely, I agreed. People share beds all the time, constantly, siblings, college friends, coworkers. You and I are none of those things. She turned a page she definitely hadn't read. The point stands. I lay down on the left side of the bed, careful to maintain 6 inches of clearance from the pillow wall. The city light came through the skylight above us, the diffused orange-gray of Chicago at night, not dark enough to feel like sleeping, not bright enough to read by. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then Petra said, she called me at 7:30. I was between clients. She just said, I left him, and I could hear Brody crying in the back seat. He's the 2-year-old, and I didn't know what to say, so I just said, okay, come here, and she drove 6 hours. I turned my head toward her. She was still looking at the ceiling. She's been thinking about it for a long time, she added. Longer than she told me, I think. But this week, she stopped. Let out a slow breath. It doesn't matter right now, she's safe. The kids are safe. That's what matters. Right. She finally closed the book. Sorry. I know you came home wanting to decompress, and instead you got. She gestured vaguely at the apartment below us. Situation. I came home wanting to sleep in my own building, which I am doing. She looked at me. You're very calm. I've been on a job site with a structural engineer and a general contractor who disagreed about load-bearing walls. A crying 2-year-old has nothing on that. A small laugh. Real one. It came out before she could stop it, and for a second her whole face changed, softer, unguarded, before she reeled it back in. I looked at the skylight instead. In the morning, I came downstairs to find a 7-year-old sitting on my kitchen counter, eating cereal and watching me with the solemn, evaluating gaze of a federal agent. Her name, I would learn, was Maisie. The 5-year-old, a boy named Reed, who shared a name with the kid on Petra's list, but this was real, was on the floor assembling something with couch cushions. Brody, the youngest, was asleep in the bouncy seat Danny had brought in from the car, one small fist curled beside his cheek like a question mark. Danny herself was at the kitchen table with coffee and the particular stillness of someone who had cried until they couldn't and then kept going. Anyway, she was taller than Petra, darker haired, with the same direct eyes. When she saw me, she said, I'm sorry. I know you don't know me. Petra talks about you, I said. What does she say? That you make the best bourbon peach pie in the state of Indiana. Danny looked at Petra. Petra raised her mug in acknowledgement. And apparently, I added, getting a coffee mug from the cabinet, that you're the only one in your family who can parallel park on the first try. He asked about you, Petra said to her sister. That first month. After you came up for the long weekend, he asked if you were doing okay. Danny looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked back down at her coffee. I should have left 2 years ago, she said quietly. It wasn't directed at either of us. It was just the truth settling out loud. Nobody answered her. Sometimes that's the right response. Maisie climbed off the counter without being asked and put her bowl in the sink. The kid had more self-possession than most adults I worked with. Petra's sister stayed 3 days, which became 4 days, which became 5 days, which coincided with Danny finding a sublease nearby through a friend of a friend, getting Maisie enrolled in a school, and making roughly 140 phone calls I wasn't supposed to hear, and definitely did because our apartment has the square footage of a decisive studio and the acoustics of a concert hall, which is ironic given my profession. Through all of it, Petra slept in the loft, and so did I. I want to be precise here, because precision matters. We slept on opposite sides of a pillow wall for 5 nights. We did not touch. We spoke in the low, careful voices of people who had agreed not to name the thing in the room. But on the fourth night, around 2 in the morning, I woke to the sound of Danny talking on the phone in the living room, too quietly to make out the words but with the specific cadence of a conversation that costs something. I lay there and didn't move. After a while, I heard Petra shift. "You're awake," she whispered. "Yes." A pause. "She's okay. She does this. Processes out loud at weird hour. I know." Another pause. The city light moved slightly across the ceiling as a cloud passed. "Owen?" Petra said, very quietly. "Yeah, thank you. For what? For not making her feel like she was imposing. For knowing Brody's name by the second day. For buying the juice boxes." I hadn't thought of the juice boxes as a thing. I'd just seen she was out. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I know I don't have to." Her voice was smaller now, or maybe it was just the dark. "I'm doing it because I want to." There was something in the way she said it that sat differently than the usual Petra economy of words. Something careful had been laid aside for a second. I turned my head. She was already looking at me, which I was not prepared for. "What?" I said. "Nothing." She looked back at the ceiling. "Go to sleep. Petra. Owen. You were going to say something." A long pause. "I say things all day. I work with people who are relearning how to use their hands after strokes. I write documentation and insurance appeals and treatment plans. By 10 o'clock, I have used up all my words. And right now?" She was quiet for a moment. "Right now, I still have a few left. So use them." She exhaled slowly. "I don't think us living together is as temporary as I thought it was going to be when I put up that listing." I waited. "And I don't know if that's." She stopped. Started again. "Danny's situation made me think about things. About how you can be standing inside something you want and talk yourself into believing you're just passing through." The pillow wall between us seemed suddenly very small. "Petra, you can tell me that's none of my business. You can tell me you see me as the person whose name is on the other half of the lease. I don't." She turned her head. "I don't see you that way," I said. "I haven't for a while." Below us, Danny's voice had gone quiet. One of the kids made a small sleep sound, then settled. The building creaked once in the way old buildings do, shifting weight. "How long?" Petra asked. "You want the honest answer or the answer that makes me sound like a functional person?" "Honest, the spice rack," I said. She blinked. "What?" "The day you moved in, before I got there, you alphabetized the spice rack. I came home and stood in the kitchen and I thought." I stopped, tried to say it right. "I thought, this person is going to be a problem for me." A soft sound from her, not quite a laugh. "And then you burned the pasta anyway," I said. "And you didn't even apologize, you just said the stove runs hot and made toast and I thought, yeah, problem." She pressed her lips together, the smile was trying very hard. "I made rules," I said. "Don't say anything, don't do anything. It's a good living situation, don't ruin it." "You made rules," she repeated. "Several. Were they effective?" "Catastrophically not." She laughed then, a real one, and I heard Danny shift in the living room, and we both went quiet, listening. Nothing. Then Petra turned back to the ceiling, but she was still smiling, and the room felt entirely different from how it had 5 nights ago. "I made rules, too," she admitted. "Mine were more clinical. I framed it as maintaining appropriate boundaries with a house fate. Did it work? You bought me soup when I had bronchitis in February and didn't tell me you were going to. I just came home and it was there." She paused. That was roughly when the framework started to fail. I remembered February. I hadn't thought much of it. She'd been sick. I'd been at the grocery store anyway. It seemed straightforward. "It was soup," I said. "It was the right sweet soup," she said. "You read the label." Mine has to be the low sodium kind because of my blood pressure medication. And you knew that. You just. She shook her head. You'd retained it. I'm detail-oriented by profession. Owen? Yeah. Let me tell you something without you deflecting into your job description. I closed my mouth. I've been doing a thing, she said carefully, where I tell myself the reason I don't want you to move out, even though your name's not on the lease anymore, and technically, you could, is because splitting utilities makes sense, and I'd hate to find a new person. Practical, completely rational, very sound reasoning. I know. She turned her head. I have been lying to myself for approximately 6 months. From downstairs came the small sound of a child turning over in sleep. Outside, a siren moved through and away. Petra, I said. Yeah, I'm not going to find a new apartment. She looked at me. Not because of utilities, I said. Because I don't want to. She was very still for a moment. Then she reached across the pillow wall, not all the way, just enough that her fingers rested against the back of my hand, light as a question. I turned my hand over. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. Her fingers settled into mine, and that was enough for the night. Danny and the kids moved out on a Thursday afternoon. The sublease was a 2-bedroom in Andersonville, 9-minute drive, close enough to a good school. Maisie insisted on giving me her last fruit snack from the pack she'd been working on for 2 days. I accepted it with the gravity the moment deserved. Danny hugged me at the door for longer than I expected. She pulled back and looked at me with the particular steadiness of someone who has recently made very hard decisions and now evaluates everything through that lens. Don't do the thing, she said. What thing? The thing where you have it and don't say it. The thing where you wait until it gets easier, except it doesn't get easier. It just gets more expensive. I didn't ask her what she meant. It was clear enough. I'll keep that in mind, I said. She nodded once and gathered Brody from where he'd been sitting on my shoe and went down the hall. Petra stood beside me watching them go. When the elevator closed, she let out a slow breath. You okay? I asked. Getting there. She looked at the apartment. It was noticeably quieter, which was both a relief and something else. She's going to be okay, right? Yeah, I said. She is. She seemed better. She made eye contact with her coffee this morning like she'd arrived at a decision. That's progress. Petra laughed softly. She was still looking at the empty hallway. I thought about what Danny had said. The thing where you have it and don't say it. Hey, I said. Petra turned. I said, I think we should get dinner. She tilted her head. We have leftovers. Not that kind of dinner. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, the Italian place on Milwaukee? Wherever you want. The Italian place has good lighting, she said, professionally speaking. You've mentioned it twice. I have strong feelings about incandescent warm tone at 65 lux. I know you do. She smiled, quiet and certain. Give me 20 minutes. The Italian place had 6 tables, 2 candles each, and a host who addressed every party as you two, without any prompting, which felt like the universe making an editorial comment. We were seated by the window. The city moved past the glass in the dark. Petra looked at the menu she already knew. We should probably discuss, she said without looking up, the part where we lived together. We've been discussing it since February, I said. In subtext. Subtext is exhausting. It's also been a rent-effective emotional strategy. She put down the menu. If this goes badly, it won't. You don't know that. No. But I know that you alphabetize things when you're nervous and you burned pasta on a clean stove and you talk back to nature documentaries like David Attenborough is going to hear you. I leaned forward slightly. I know that you've cried twice that I know of. Once when Danny called from the car, and once at a segment about elephant calves, and both times you pretended you hadn't. I know that when you're working through a hard patient case, you go quiet for 20 minutes and then you're okay. She was very still. I know you, I said. Not the lease version. You. She breathed out slowly. That's a lot of data points. I'm thorough, Owen. Her voice changed. I'm not scared of trying this. I'm scared of how much I already want it to work. I reached across the table. She looked at my hand for a second. Then she put hers in it. Same, I said. The waiter arrived, noticed the arrangement, and retreated with minimal eye contact and admirable professionalism. We stayed for 2 hours. We talked about her sister and her work, and my upcoming job in Denver. A different Denver, different project, same terrible altitude headache on day 1. We talked about the apartment, about the loft, about how we had both separately started thinking of the layout as permanent before either of us said it out loud. We paid the check and she took my hand on the sidewalk like she'd been doing it for years, which in some ways she had, except that tonight she meant it differently. Outside our building, she stopped and turned and kissed me before I could say anything clever, which she told me later was deliberate. The kiss tasted like Barolo and the end of a long-held breath. I held on a little longer than she intended. She didn't complain. In the elevator, she stood beside me, her shoulder against mine, and said, "For the record, yeah?" I was alphabetizing things when I put up the listing, I know. Because someone had moved out in 48 hours and I was nervous, a little. She looked at the elevator doors. "And then you showed up and you had your own tape measure. It's a reasonable thing to carry. I know that now." The doors opened. "But at the time it made me think you were strange. And now?" She stepped into the hallway, turned back, and looked at me with the particular expression that I had catalogued, somewhere around month 3, as the one I would have made rules about if I'd seen it sooner. "Now I think it's one of my favorite things about you," she said. We went inside. The apartment was quiet in the way it only gets after chaos has departed, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I made tea. She sat on the counter, which she normally disapproves of, and stole sips from my mug, which she also normally disapproves of, and we talked until the radiator clanked on at midnight and the city settled into its slower register. Later, I came out of the bathroom, and she was standing at the base of the loft stairs. "The pillow wall is still up there," she said. "I noticed. I'll take it down, I appreciate that." She climbed a step, then looked back at me. "Still 7? Emotional bandwidth. Higher now," I said. "You?" "Getting there," she said. Then she turned and went up. I followed. 6 months later, I came home from a job in Pittsburgh, smaller city, better altitude, client who actually liked my spec sheets, and found Petra sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of tea and a laptop open to a real estate listing. Not a rental. A listing. She looked up when I came in. "I've been looking at 2 bedrooms," she said. "In the city? A few neighborhoods." She turned the laptop toward me. "There's one in Logan Square, renovated kitchen, good natural light, the bathroom's bigger than ours." I set my bag down, walked over to look. "There's a 3rd room," she said carefully. "Small. Could be an office." "Could be," I agreed. "Or a studio," she said. "For projects. Long-term plans." I looked at her. She was using the focused, even voice she used when she had thought something through completely and was now just making sure I had caught up. "Are you asking me something?" I said. She closed the laptop. "I'm asking if you want to stop treating this apartment like a place we ended up and start treating the next one like a place we chose." The tea was steaming between her hands. The listing was 3 bedrooms, actually, which we both knew, even though she'd said 2. She'd always been precise with language. This was intentional. I sat down across from her. "Logan Square is loud on weekends," I said. "It is. The acoustics in vintage construction are inconsistent. I know you'll fix that. The commute to the medical district is annoying from there. There's a direct bus." She looked at me steadily. "Owen. Yeah. Do you want to go home with me?" "Not the lease version. Us." I picked up the other mug. "Send me the listing," she smiled. "Not the careful one. Not the contained one. The one that had arrived before she could catch it, the one I'd been cataloging since October, the one I'd made several unsuccessful rules about." "Already did," she said. 40 minutes ago." I laughed. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Outside, Chicago did its thing, enormous and loud and entirely indifferent to us, which was fine. We had enough to pay attention to right here.